And welcome back to Front Office Sports, everyone. I'm Baker Machado in New York, and the U.S. Open is upon us, and there's no shortage of headlines in the world of tennis of late. From player pay boycotts and tour schedule overhauls to calling matches with his brother John, plus his new podcast. Joining us now is Grand Slam champion, veteran commentator, and the play-by-play voice of American tennis, Patrick McEnroe. Patrick, thanks so much for hanging out with us.
Baker, thank you for having me. Great to be back.
You have Djokovic and Sabalenka teaming up for mixed doubles. You also have Iga with Casper Ruud as well. I mean, what goes on in these pairings, and what do you sort of have your eye on there, too?
Well, this was the first time they tried this was last year, doing this sort of kind of invite only. And now they've invited a few more doubles specialists to play in the tournament because they want to get some star power into the tournament, especially the week, what they used to call Fan Week, is now basically like the first week of the Open. There's qualifying still going on, which is the best bargain in sports. You could go out there for free and watch some of the best players in the world try to qualify. But now they've got other events going on, an exhibition this year with Roger Federer, and this mixed doubles tournament, which just goes over 2 days. So there was a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering to come up with a format, a quicker format, not exhaustive for the players, to get the top players to play. Because if they do it during, like they normally do it during the majors, during the second week of the tournament, none of the singles players want to stick around and play the mixed doubles. So now you've got these pairings that are almost sort of like thrown together. You know, Djokovic, Sabalenka. I mean, they're friends, but neither of them are very good in doubles at this point. Sabalenka used to be a great doubles player, but then she started just doing singles. So it's kind of interesting to see the stars come out and try to play doubles. You know, they sort of take it seriously, but they're sort of having fun. And then you have the real doubles players coming in that are playing for big money, because the prize money's gone up exponentially based on the fact that they're selling tickets for this event. And last year, I called the final on live on ESPN. It was sold out in Arthur Ashe Stadium. That's never happened before during Fan Week. So there's a lot of buzz for the event again this year.
Yeah, Fan Week, I remember Australian Open now has these new contests as well.
Yes.
To get people excited during Fan Week. We were talking about how the star power with the Williams sisters, what they would bring. Obviously, there's been a ton of injuries on the men's side, especially on the singles side, with Sinner, Alcaraz, potentially even Djokovic. All three are hoping, obviously, to play for the U.S. Open. But is there a concern that this sort of, softens the excitement on the men's side if all three of those guys can't play?
Oh, if all three of those guys can't play, that would more than soften the excitement. I mean, it'd be a major bummer. I mean, the tournament would still go on. There'll still be a lot of stories, as there were this year in Paris at the French Open when Alcaraz didn't play. Then
Sinner went out early
with the heat got to him. But then you had great stories like, Menchik and Hodar, Fonseca, these are all young players that are, in my view, they have the potential to win majors down the road. Whether or not that's going to happen this year is up in the air. But it would be nice to have both. We'd love to. We're all waiting to hear if Alcaraz is going to come back. He's had a serious wrist injury. He missed Wimbledon as well. Sinner was really surprising to me because he wins Wimbledon. He took a break after Paris to kind of deal with this heat issue that he's had. And then apparently he's got some sort of knee problem, which we saw no signs of during Wimbledon when he won it. So that's concerning for him, and certainly concerning for the tournament if you're missing your top two players and arguably the two biggest draws, at least in men's tennis.
And for those of us who want an American to perform, we've always thought, this might be the opening that an American needs when these two are not competing for the title every single time. But then we see Fritz and Shelton can't seem to capitalize on that. If, let's just say hypothetically, Sinner, Alcaraz, even Djokovic aren't able to play in the U.S. Open, is this the time for somebody on the men's side from the Americans to really step up here, or should we be giving up hope that an American wins?
We're not going to give up hope. We're definitely not going to give it. To answer your question 100%. I mean, and that's part of what inspired Alexander Zverev, right, who'd been in 3 major finals. He'd been knocking on the door of winning a major. He finally breaks through in Paris and wins his first major. Not arguably, he's actually had a better career than any of those American guys that you mentioned. Now, Ben Shelton is getting into that mix where he's becoming a legit top 5 player. He sort of surpassed Taylor Fritz, at least on the American side of the rankings, winning again in Canada just a week or so ago. So that was another big title for him. But for both of those guys, to answer your question, Baker, absolutely you have to look at this as a massive opportunity. You even have to look at it as an opportunity, even if Sinner and Alcaraz do play, because they're obviously going to come in a little bit underdone, maybe not quite at 100%. I would give Shelton the best chance, because he's got a huge game. He's improved the return game. He's got a massive serve and forehand. And here's the thing about him. He loves the big stage, and there's no stage bigger than New York at the U.S. Open. Now, Taylor Fritz has been in the final a couple of years ago, losing to Sinner, so he's still got a shot. He's still the most consistent top American player. And then you throw Francis Tiafoe in there, who loves playing in New York. He's been to 2 semis there. He can light it up as well. There's a young kid from California that I really like named Lerner Tien. He's a lefty. He's only 20. He's sort of coming into his own physically, and I think as he gets a little bit stronger and a little more mature physically, he's a guy to me that could also be a top player from the United States.
The other big news coming out of the U.S. Open is the Honeydews is staying the same price again this year.
Okay, well, that is big news. That is big
and
news.
It's staying the same price for 3 years now in a row.
Okay.
Patrick, how many Honeydeuces do you end up having over the course of the tournament?
They're a little sweet for me.
They are.
Yeah, they're a little sweet. I prefer mine a little stronger, but it is pretty amazing. I mean, not only everybody likes to talk about the Honeydews because it's mostly because of the price,
right? But all the food in general.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The food out there is a whole nother level. I've been to a couple of events recently. One for City Harvest, that helps feed people that can't eat, with all these top chefs in New York, that run these huge restaurants. And in fact, I interviewed Rocco DiSpirito yesterday at his new restaurant. But they all talk about, this guy's doing the chicken nuggets at the Open,
with the caviar on
it.
Yeah,
exactly. So the food, that's become like a bigger part of the U.S. Open over the years, and the Australian Open too. These big tennis events. Of course, it's about the tennis, but in more and more, it's about the food. It's about the entertainment. It's about the sort of the show that goes on in addition to it. And based on the ticket prices, it's going up. Yeah, the numbers keep going up, and people keep spending money to go see the U.S. Open.
I think that segues great into my next question, sort of about the virality of a lot of the things that you see in the U.S. Open, because we see so many influencers and content creators, not just obsessed with tennis, but dating tennis players, all of that. I mean, what do you sort of think of the growing presence of influencers at these tennis tournaments, especially the U.S. Open?
I think it's fun. I mean, it's fun. People love it. It's another, everybody's trying to get eyeballs, right? And including individual players, not just in tennis, but in all sports. You have your own platform now. You can do your own show. You can, make your own announcement, as LeBron James did. I'm going to go play in Philadelphia. So I think the players have, this new generation, obviously they live with it. They grew up with it. And for people that see the opportunity, it's New York City, it's the end of the summer, it's just before the football season, really gets going. And the Open as an event has become like a star, like it's just celebrities everywhere. And the U.S. Open has tried to do that. And they've done a great job of it over the years. They invite the celebs, they put them in the nice suites, and, they send a car to pick them up. So I think all in all, it's been very beneficial to the tournament as a whole. And it's also, maybe not the greatest thing for the real tennis fan, because they're sort of getting priced out of the market. Yeah. But that's sort of happening to all sports.
Well, I almost wonder if it's good for the players, because you're an individual brand yourself. You're not on a team, all that. So if anything, they're learning these tricks from 100%. These influencers to grow their brand and their 100%. Personality.
And I think if you can connect with people on social media, that just helps you with your brand, helps you get more marketing deals and so on. So the players are more savvy than they've ever been when it comes to that, as are these obviously influencers who I guess do it for a living. So there you go.
Let's talk player pay for a moment. There's reports the Grand Slams are going to collectively have a new player council regarding the pay at the Slams. By the way, the council was one of what the players' demands that they had. But obviously the money for the U.S. Open is obviously going to depend on what the protests happen here. We talked to Jess Pegula last week, and she said she expects conversations among top players about potential protests in the coming weeks about the Grand Slams. I guess, where do you sort of side on this? And does this make your job harder on the broadcast side when you have a lot of the stars boycotting media?
No, it doesn't make it harder. I mean, to me, it's what the players absolutely should be doing. They should be getting more money. Now, should they be getting 50% of the revenue like they do in team sports? No, because that would, but they're getting essentially in the teens of the percentage of the profits that these big tournaments bring in. So I think they deserve to get, I'm going to say, in the low to mid 20%, which would be a significant boost, especially for the players that are not the big name players. The guys like me that were sort of journeyman players, ranked 25 to 100 in the world. So those are the players that really need it, and I think would really benefit from this. And that's what Djokovic has stood up for over the years, and Jess Pegula and others at the top of the game. But the money is there. Obviously, right after COVID, a lot of the tournaments lost money in that year or two. But it's ramped up to the point where they're making so much more money at these major tournaments, and the percentage of that money that's gone back to the players has basically stayed stagnant. So I think the players have every right to say, we deserve a slightly bigger piece of the pie. The dreaded B word is always out there, boycott. And if there actually was a boycott, that would shake things up. But I think everybody wants to avoid that in the tennis world, including the players, because look, at the end of the day, the U.S. Open and Wimbledon and they pay the most money of any tournament. So at the end of the day, that's their argument, which is a good one. And they also use a lot of the funding and the money they make at the U.S. Open to go to USTA programs, as a not-for-profit. They're not-for-profit. They're making, gazillions of dollars. But a lot of that money goes back into what is supposed to grow the game of tennis, grow the sport.
You mentioned the B word, the boycott word. You don't foresee a situation where this snowballs to where you have both the men's and women's sides actually doing that?
I don't think so, because I think that the majors realize that they still have a great thing going. The ticket prices are going up. The sponsorship dollars are going up. The television revenue's going up. So they're making a lot of money. And they also realize that the players, got to get some more of that. But the players also realize, we can't push it too far, because, we are making most of our money and getting most of our, you call it marketing and profiling, from doing well in the biggest tournaments, the Grand Slams.
One of the other things the players have been complaining about is the schedule. A WTA Tour Architecture Council member told us that a vote to cut the required 500 level tournaments for top players is expected in the coming weeks. I mean, do you sort of envision a scenario where the tournament requirements will be addressed based also on all the injuries that we've been seeing right now?
This has been a common complaint for ever since I've been in tennis, and I've been in tennis a long time.
This isn't a new conversation.
This is not new. But
it used to be like a Serena rule, wasn't
exactly.
it, for a while?
Serena used to not play after the U.S. Open ended, right? But when you're Serena or you're Federer or Nadal, these players that are legendary players, they can afford to take time off. Players that are the journeyman players can't afford to do that. They want to play more tournaments because that's how they make money. There's no guaranteed contracts in tennis, none. So I think they have to continue to look at it, because the game's gotten more aggressive. It's gotten more violent. The players have to move quicker. They hit the ball harder. That's why I think Alcaraz is risk, because he's getting so much torque. A lot more hip problems, a lot more ankle issues. So definitely the players, though, have to take it upon themselves, which they've always done, to take care of their bodies. Their argument would be, well, the tour sort of forces us to play more than we really want to, than our bodies are prepared to. Well, you don't have to play as many tournaments as a lot of them do. But again, it's a little bit of a catch-22, because you don't have the window to be a professional player is not that long, number one. And then number two, you don't play, you don't get paid. It's as simple as that. So the players are sort of in a bind. But I think the players over the years, Baker, have adjusted. Like they do way more off-court training, recovery, fitness work than has ever been done before, all to try to maintain their bodies, to not get hurt, to stay healthy. But certainly the tempo of the game and the violent nature of the movement in the game now is making it more and more complicated for players to stay healthy.
Let's move to broadcasting. I mean, you and your brother John are fixtures in the booth. You have worked so many different networks, including ESPN, like you'll be doing for the U.S. Open. I guess, what's the best and worst parts about broadcasting with your brother?
I've loved it because when he started out, just a little bit before I did, I was still playing. And as you said, he's pretty much worked for every network. NBC started out, CBS used to do the Open, BBC he works for. So when ESPN got into the majors, I'd worked for ESPN for a long, I've been there for almost 30 years now. But John didn't work for ESPN because they didn't do the majors, essentially. So when ESPN started to do it, I was like, yeah, I think they're going to probably bring John over at some point. So he's probably going to sort of replace me as the main color guy.
There's only be one McEnroe.
Yeah. Well, so it actually, it was part of the reason that I continue to try to improve myself as a broadcaster. Do play-by-play, do studio, host a studio. I would always ask ESPN, hey, let me host a studio when Chris McEnroe needs to take a day off, or Chris Fowler needs a break, whatever it was. So I really tried to expand what I was able to do. To hopefully keep myself working for as long as possible, but also to work with my brother, because that's something I always wanted to do. So for me to be able to share the booth with him at all the big matches now, at Wimbledon, at the Open, at the Australian Open, we even did TNT together the last 2 years at the French. So that's been awesome. It's a little bit of a different, whether it's just me and him, whether it's me and him and Fowler, whether there's 3 in the booth, whether it's me and, working with someone else, let's say Mary Jo Fernandez, you always have to deal with the person. To me, the most important thing about being a good broadcaster is listening to what's happening on the court, but also to your partner, because I think I like to make it more of like we're chatting about tennis. So John can go off on tangents and do his thing, but that's what makes him unique, and makes him the best at what he does.
Because you're family and you're working together, is there ever moments that he feels maybe too comfortable in the booth and just like lets things go, and you says something and you sort of just roll your eyes and you're like, this would only happen because you're working with me?
I tried to get him to do that.
Yeah.
I tried to get him to do it. I think that's what makes people enjoy it when when we're together, because I think it kind of sounds like we're sitting at home, and we'll disagree sometimes on certain things. We've disagreed a lot over the years. He used to get pissed at me all the time when I was playing. So you never listen to me. You never take my advice. I was a much different style of player, not nearly as good as him. But I think in the broadcast world, I think we've both reached a place, especially in the last 10 years or so, where we're both very comfortable in what we've done and kind of who we are. And I think he appreciates how hard I've worked over the years to try to improve myself. And he's been it's so funny because he tries to get out of going to any meetings, production meetings. So depending on the network, sometimes they take him seriously, sometimes they don't. And he's like, why do I need to go to I've been doing this for, he'll say, I've been doing this for 35 years. He wants to show up, lights are on, 2 minutes before, let's go. So he's not really, even though he does a ton of prep work, like he's always following, he doesn't want to like rehearse. And that's different than other people like professional broadcasters, but he's been doing it a long time and they keep hiring him. So we're doing something right.
Right. Also, so ESPN has 3 of the 4 Grand Slams. TNT, the other network you guys work for, has the French Open. Both their coverages are unique and different in their own ways. I guess, what do you sort of see working for them as the differences at these networks in terms of how they cover the sport?
Yeah, TNT has been interesting just because they have never covered tennis.
Yeah.
So I met all the guys that did the NBA Today, the NBA show, which, when they lost the NBA, they jumped in and got the friend. So I got to work with a lot of them, and, they really have an interesting attitude towards a lot of the studio stuff. Is just like, hey, we want you guys to just come in, be relaxed, be fresh, just be kind of off the cuff, not rehearsed, in the same way. So for me, that was a little bit different, and sort of a breath of fresh air to kind of have a little different take. Depending on who's been in charge at ESPN, that could kind of change over the years. But man, you asked me earlier. I didn't answer the question because I don't have an answer. There's nothing I don't like about broadcasting. I really love it. I get fired up every year, even though I've been doing this for so long, to get to the U.S. Open, to get to make the trip down to Australia, to go to Wimbledon every year. So I really love it, and I love the fact that it can change, day to day, because every match is different. ESPN brought in a lot of the younger guys and gals that were just off the tour. Andy Roddick was fantastic. Sam Querrey, Jeannie Bouchard was working with us at TNT. So there's a lot of like fresh faces coming in as well. So that, keeps us old guys on our toes.
NIL in the current college sports landscape has really been primarily beneficial to football and basketball programs across the country. We're seeing a lot of schools right now either cut or have their tennis programs sort of like really sort of minimalized at their schools. Are you concerned about that? And could that hurt a potential pipeline of the next great American star here because of that?
I wrote, I don't know if you saw it, but I wrote
a
big op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which kind of caught fire in the college world, particularly in the tennis world. Yes, I'm very concerned about it. I'm very concerned about not just tennis, but the other, I call them the Olympic sports, the ones that don't bring in huge money at schools, swimming, wrestling. Some people go to wrestling, they make money maybe at Iowa, but they're not at Stanford where I went. They didn't make money at Stanford on the tennis program, but they had, Olympic swimmers on their swim team. So I'm concerned about those sports, and I'm also concerned about the number of international players. There's some players making money in tennis, nothing like the football and basketball, obviously. That's fine. I mean, to a certain extent, I'm okay with that. But I'm not happy with the amount of international players that are flooding not only D1 but D3 schools in tennis, taking spots from Americans. To me, it's not about the ones that are going to be professionals. That's like a 0.1% of the players that play in Division I college are going to be pros. Ben Shelton would be one. Emma Navarro would be another. Peyton Stearns. I can name, on both hands, two hands, all the players, right? Those players I'm not concerned about because, you could also make the argument that the international players have raised the bar so that's actually better for those players. What I'm concerned about is that 98% of the kids, like most of the kids at our tennis academy here in New York City, the John McEnroe Tennis Academy, that their sole reason of dedicating themselves to being very good junior tennis players is to play in college, possibly get a scholarship. And we're seeing them get squeezed out. So I actually went to D.C. a couple of months ago. I'm going back to talk to a congressional committee in September after the U.S. Open about this very topic. And I personally believe there should be a cap on the amount of international. Look, tennis is one of the most international sports in the world, right? But the fact that all these international players, and many of them, by the way, are coming to play as freshmen in college at 21, 22 years old, having played 3 or 4 years on the tour. And so that means they're really good, but they're not quite good enough to get into the main draw of the U.S. Open. But if they're ranked 250, 300 in the world, they're legit.
Sure. All right. We also got to get to the big news about your podcast, the Mac Daddy Show. You're doing this alongside sports executive Rich Big Daddy Salgado. Tell us a little bit about this. Who are some of the potential first guests that you got and anything else on this?
It's kind of it's almost like an odd couple mix.
Yeah.
Me and Rich, because he comes from the football background. He's an insurance guy, and he knows everybody in the football world and in other sports too through his business. So we worked together at a couple of news stations, and the producer who would always bring us in to do these shows said, I want to, put you guys together. And this producer, Lauren Emery's his name, I worked with him, and we had always talked about doing a show. And he says, let's bring Big Daddy in because I think you guys would be a good mix. You're sort of the host, and he's sort of your side guy. So we got Michael Strahan coming out August 26th will be our first show. We're releasing it.
Is that like an NFL preview episode almost?
Yeah, it's more about, we really make it more about the individual and what their life really. And we'll do some podcasts and some shows about, the issues going on the field right now. But we have the interview will be each Wednesday of every week. So we did Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad. We did Ed Burns recently. We did Brandy Chastain, Mike, so we probably done about 20 interviews. As I was telling to you earlier, we interviewed Rocco DiSpirito, the famous chef, yesterday here in New York City. So it's been, for me, a lot of fun because I've always wanted to do that kind of thing. I started my own podcast 4 years ago in my basement, right when COVID hit. That sort of turned into my own radio show on Sirius XM, which I do every Saturday.
It's one of your 5 jobs you've got.
Yeah, exactly. I got to keep moving. I got to keep working. But I love it. And this, we started the project about 3 months ago. And the release date, as I said, August 26th. And we'll have a whole list of great guests that we've already put in the can.
I can't wait to listen to those episodes and have you back to chat more of those. Grand Slam champion, veteran commentator, play-by-play voice of American tennis, and you can see it at the U.S. Open, Patrick McEnroe. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me.
And stay with Front Office Sports, everyone, for more on the business and culture of sports.